Senthil. I've been in the technology industry for about 2 decades now, primarily in banking and financial services. I've been engineer throughout my life. Started off with programming as early as 2000, and then have been building enterprise solutions in insurance space for first couple of years, and then I've moved on to banking. Since then, I haven't turned back. I haven't don't have any experience in any other industry. Primarily, have been building core banking products for about a decade, and then I've been building some enterprise applications at the bank. And the last few years have been predominantly on origination, onboarding, and digital journeys for customers. And last couple of years have been a lot of focus on cloud and DevOps, which I believe are at an inflection point, which is going to change the way everybody builds technology. Today, I think very few people adopt this, and those are the top technology companies that we know of. So I think in future, everybody is going to adopt something similar to that. Many organizations think that DevOps is more like a skill that can be hired, and then the organization can suddenly become magical in a few months' time, and then can become successful. But I think a lot of them end up in a failure, because DevOps is not about just some tools that can be deployed to make things better. It's more about the culture. The primary thing about DevOps is culture. Unless you change the culture of how you engineer and build software in your organization, unless you adopt practices of agile, truly agile, you're not going to get any benefits out of DevOps. It's not about buying some licenses of tools that can help you monitor, that can do logging and monitoring, etc. It's more about how you fundamentally build software. So, and one of the struggle for traditional enterprises, especially is that how do they measure whether DevOps is successful or not, right? So everybody is interested to know whether our organization is successful in Agile or in DevOps. But it's very hard to measure success. A true measure of success is some things most CXOs wouldn't be aware of. So if you look at companies like Amazon or Spotify or Netflix, the measure of success is how many builds are they able to do in a day, how many production deployments are they able to roll out in a day, which is like just another job. If our organization, although has adopted DevOps and still does weekend deployments and struggle to deploy a release into production in weeks, and it takes weeks and months to deploy it, that clearly shows that the organization is not successful. But in many large organizations, it is considered as success just by deploying some set of tools and creating some processes. But unless these metrics, which clearly define how you engineer software and how you are managing software in production, unless these metrics are clearly defined and identified, you are not even in a position to measure yourself. So very few organizations have got the right metrics to measure, and then very few organizations are actually changing the way the metrics are measured, and then they're realizing the success. Banks have not been slow to adopt the technology. Banks are fast at adopting technology. The only issue is with traditional organizations where they have the way the organization structure is defined with governance, compliance, risk, control, and technology functions. It's very difficult to bring that kind of agility that we really need. For example, a company like Amazon or Netflix would build all their compliance controls in an automation pipeline like DevOps, and then they take the code through this set of controls, and then the output would be a software which is compliant and which is highly resilient and which can run in production. Whereas if you have to do the same thing in a traditional organization, especially in a bank, there are a lot of manual controls and there are a lot of departments involved in validating all those controls before the software goes into production. So the traditional organizations who have a very good organization of making and checking things, the processes that they follow, where a manual review is required of things, and banks are still struggling with that. Unless banks can come out of that verification cycle and put all of the verification into the tools and change the processes in terms of change management and release management and how they build software for compliance, it's going to be difficult. I think that's the primary reason why banks are laggards. Although from technology point of view, I can say that banks are adopting cloud. We've got tons of stuff running on AWS. We've got a lot of good tooling in terms of DevOps tools around monitoring, around logging, around how we build, how we, the artifacts that we store. All of them we adopt the best in terms of other technology companies. However, we still are not able to achieve what these technology companies do, which is produce software and deploy software into production so fast with all the compliance automated. We are not able to achieve that. I think that's where the banks are struggling, and that's what is probably going to change in the next few years. Some amount of change has happened, but I think there is large to change. Especially if you look at the ownership of the product, the way a service is defined and the way a product owner owns that piece of service and decides how he wants to build that is something has not changed as much as I would like, or in general we would like. The primary, if you look at, for example, if you look at Spotify as an instance, they've got like 300, 400 services that they run. You got a well-defined product owner of a particular service, say streaming service, for example, and then he decides what features go in, how do we build it, and what are the skills required for the team to build it, etc. But in traditional organizations, the product ownership is not so easy. The banks have got global presence. If you take a multinational bank, they've got presence in hundreds of countries, and then the regulations differ by markets, and then the features that you can offer also differs, and it's a bit difficult to build something which is universal, unlike some of the technology companies have found a way to do it. Like streaming music is same across the globe. It doesn't matter where you're streaming it. But if you look at the way banking is done, it's not the same everywhere. So the product owner really struggles to collect requirements from this different countries and regions, and then building a backlog which he can deliver is something very, very difficult to do, because he struggles to identify priorities and what needs to go in, etc. So the product ownership is one area which I think requires a lot of improvement, and that could probably that could probably change the culture of how we build software. Once we have got a solid product owner with a solid backlog, then I think the teams can deliver it really fast. So today, although we might have good quality engineers, they struggle to deliver software faster because of lack of information in the backlog that is sufficient enough for them to build their stories out, to be able to build a feature that can be rolled out to production quickly. Most of the product owners come from traditional business background who like to build an end-to-end feature and take it to market, whereas the whole idea of Agile and DevOps is to build something quickly and then take it to market and learn from it and then start improving on it. So once the product ownership changes a bit, even the quality engineers that we have, I think, would be able to start releasing software much faster and then truly become a DevOps organization. Very, very good question. I think we have come a full cycle now on microservices. Now, for the last few months that I've been reading, you would see articles of, is microservice really required for your organization? Is microservice really the way to build every software? The answer is no. Microservices is a technology which is quite complex in terms of operations and in terms of how it communicates to each other. Because finer the number of components you have, you got to deal with more number of failures that happens when these components talk to each other. So microservices architecture is not the de facto standard for building applications. It is suitable only for those kind of services which require the agility and which require the kind of robustness of when you deploy it onto production. So not every software is suitable to build as a microservice. Monoliths are still good. Although we build software as a monolith, the monolith is more in terms of deployment, but you still have modules inside your monoliths which break up the functionality into manageable chunks. It's all about managing complexity. That's what the definition of microservices is about. The finer you get, the culture that you need to be able to run it is also different. So depending on the software that you're building and depending on how it is put to use, you have to take that decision. I would say a lot of software still are suitable to be built in traditional monolith architectures. Same goes with the containers as well. So when you build a microservice, you generally tend to package it in a container and then deploy it into container orchestration platforms like Kubernetes. If you're deploying in AWS, and you deploy in things like EKS, etc. So these are not simple technologies. EKS, for example, the Kubernetes ecosystem is a monster. It is not possible for an organization which is not having the right engineering skills to be able to adopt something like that. So not every organization and not every project or every service or feature that we are building is suitable to build on microservices stack. You got to make those right decisions. So when you do your design, and you got to think through and put a list of things that you want to achieve, and then see whether really microservices suit you, and then go for it. If it doesn't suit, don't go for it, because the complexity involved in managing that software can only be done if you got the right engineering skills, if you got the right engineering team and the right culture to be able to manage it. Yeah, so to-do list is kind of one of the attributes that I have. I think whenever you start a day, you start a week, you start a month, you got to know what is it you're trying to achieve. So as a leader working in a large international bank, we've got objectives that we define for ourselves beginning of the year as to what we want to achieve, and then we got to help our team to be able to achieve those objectives. And based on those objectives, I have a to-do which I got to do every quarter, and then that breaks down into what you do in a month and what you do in a week. And when I start my day, I basically look at what I want to achieve today, and then I make a note of it, and then I make sure end of the day I achieve it. And then I track the same in terms of my monthly and quarterly objectives. And that's how we try to achieve what we intend to when we set beginning of the year. So that's one of the things that I do. Apart from that, I also strongly believe that as long as we are able to adapt ourselves and offer value, we will be successful. So today things have changed significantly compared to 20 years back when I started in this industry. Today, the way we build software is different. The way we deploy software is different. The way we capture requirements are different. And if I have not adopted myself to all of this, I would probably, and if I was still using my old methods, probably I would have left behind, and I would probably have not been able to climb up the ladder and be successful. So everyone needs to adapt. Everyone needs to learn based on what's happening in the surroundings and in the industry. That's one of the things that is important for success. And we also need to know how to define success. What is success? Is making a lot of money success, or being in a large organization? Is it success? What is it success? So the true success is basically the satisfaction that you get in terms of what you do, and be able to enjoy yourselves in the job that you're doing. And if you're paid to do a job that you like, then I think you're pretty successful in your life.